All right, so this right here, this is black walnut. This is the little one. Unfortunately, it's right next to our power lines, so it's probably not going to be able to make it to full size without the power company chopping it down. So I'll probably chop it down and replace it with a smaller fruit tree, which won't get large enough to bother the power line. But it's also, there's a little baby one here, and one of the ways you can tell black walnut versus a lot of other things is this structure right here. So I broke open this twig, and it has this kind of ladder-shaped pith. So it's a chambered pith. It's actually really neat. So most of the Juglans, although not all, but most of them have that, and the color can kind of tell you which species it is. So the power company came through here and basically chopped down a lot of stuff. They chopped some branches off. That's actually an American elm, which unfortunately it looks like Dutch elm disease is just moving through here, so it's killing a lot of these trees right now. And the ashes, we have some ash trees, it's killing those too. So we have some more. Here's a persimmon, and it's got a little bit of what I think is American bittersweet, which is Celastris orbiculatus. American bittersweet versus Oriental bittersweet. So this right here, you can see that nice kind of blocky, almost dragon scale bark. That is American persimmon, Diospyros virginiana. So just right there. And if you see right there, those little vines right there, that's more poison ivy. There's just tons of poison ivy. And part of the reason for that is this area was probably a pasture at some point, not too long ago. And because of that, this is kind of second regenerating forest, and it's only probably regenerated in the past maybe 30 years. Here's another poison ivy. Right there. She doesn't want to focus on it. Right there. There's a nice poison ivy right there. Super tall. So anyway, this is our forest, which we're going to be working to regenerate, or at least increase the number of species here, because there's really, in the grand scheme of things, there's not that many. But fortunately, most of them are native. Got a few invaders in here, but we've been working on them. So there's another eastern red cedar. And if you see some orange stuff over there, that's my kind of somewhat failed hide for deer hunting, because unfortunately there are kind of too many deer, just in general, at least in the eastern U.S., because of lack of natural predators. And unfortunately the only predators left are humans. And I know some people are kind of against that, but you know, if we don't control their population, they're going to damage all the plants. So this is another persimmon here, and you can see this big viney looking thing. If you get close, I think we cut it at the bottom. But you can see these little bitty hairs right here, right over here. That is classic poison ivy. So the rhyme for that is hairy rope, don't be a dope. So what's really bad is if you cut this, and then especially if you burn it, that volatilizes all the Urushiol oil, and you can get really, really horrible poison ivy. So over here, we've got a really nice, this is actually a walnut tree, and it's got grapevine, one of the wild grapes. It's a Vitis species. I don't know which one it is. I'd have to get a better look at the leaves to be sure. And then over here, this is an American elm. And you can kind of tell, because it's got kind of a spongy bark. This is some lichen growing on there. Missouri is supposed to be the center of lichen diversity, but you push on the bark and it's kind of squishy. And unfortunately, these are getting killed off by Dutch elm disease, which just showed up here, it appears, because we've got some pretty large dead trees. So even though we don't have very much forest diversity, a lot of the ones that we do have are getting killed off. So one of the ways you can tell, this isn't the best example, you can tell American elm versus other elms is they have this kind of spongy cork, and then they've got this kind of reddish phloem, and usually you'll see these repeated layers in the bark. So you can actually look for that. This one, this is an oak. Now this has another vine on it, but this, that's Parthenocissus quinquefolia, also known as Virginia creeper. Not harmful. Got some chicken craziness going on in the background. So not doesn't produce the Urushiol, so it's not, you could cut that, it wouldn't hurt you. It supports a lot of different organisms. Insects feed on it, and I like it. One of my favorites is the 8-spotted forester moth. It's an exclusive host. It's also a member of the Vitaceae, so anything that's in that family it can feed on. Unfortunately, it's being attacked by Japanese beetles. We had them last year in Marshall, and they just completely destroyed our vine that we have. Let's see, what else have we got? I think this is an ash, based on the bark. Look up. Sometimes you can kind of cheat if you're not as good with bark, and you can kind of look how the twigs are branching. If they seem to be branching opposite, you can guess that it's going to be an ash. Now these two right here, bud, which looks a lot like poison ivy. This is actually a hickory. This is a special hickory called Bitternut Hickory, which I've heard some people say the nuts aren't that bad, but it's one of the major hickories we have in this forest, and it's usually kind of a bottomland species, which kind of makes sense. You can see that the land kind of slopes away, and you actually get into kind of a little ravine on each side. So I think right here, about where we were standing, was a fence row, and there is some remnant fence over there. And basically, that got taken out later, and there's actually more fence farther back. So maybe you didn't think you could walk in the forest and figure out what trees are at this time of year, and heck, time of day for that matter. It's kind of dark. So right here we have, this is American Sycamore Platanus occidentalis. Very easy to identify by the bark, because basically on the younger branches the bark peels off very easily, but as you get down lower, you notice that the bark becomes a little bit more kind of, quote, normal. So, like I said, not a lot of diversity. Here's good enough. Oh, here we go. So here is, this is a red oak. You can kind of tell based on the bark. So Quercus rubra, those big kind of blue-green things, those are lichen. Unfortunately, there's another invasive disease killing this plant, sudden oak decline. It affects red oaks, but not white oaks. So we have mostly red oaks out here, so I feel like I'm going to have to cut down some of these trees ahead of time and just plant something that might survive.